Supergirl is, in my opinion, a film that a lot more people need to see. This is an opinion that I must admit I'm surprised I have. Going into this video, I must admit I had my expectations set pretty low. This is a film that was trashed 6 ways to Sunday upon its release, sitting pretty with a whopping 8% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 1.9 average on Letterboxd. You know, the reputable film criticism locales. Now, don't get me wrong, Supergirl is a flawed movie. In fact, there are bits of it that, even for 1984, strike me as kind of suspect, but there's also a charm to this movie that is irresistible to me. This is a very silly movie indeed, but it's also fully aware of this. It isn't trying to be an epic on the same scale as Richard Donner's Superman. It takes place in the same universe, but it's seeking out its own personality and riffs off pulpy fantasy and high camp. In this way, it feels more true to the kitschy tone of the comic books my dad kept in an old crate that I read obsessively as a young lad. If you just push the mainline Superman series to the side and engage with this movie on its own terms, its genuine earnestness is infectious. I had a great time watching it for this video and will watch again in future. So let's put on our capes and fly along with Kara Zor-El and engage with this film on its own terms. Kara Zor-El is a teenager living in Agra City, the last remnant of Krypton that lives in a pocket dimension outside of time and space, a dimension they call inner space. Kara lives as any teenager does. She lives with her parents, she goes to school, she hangs out with the local wizard Zoltar. Hang on. One day, Kara and Zoltar play with the Omegahedron, one of the power sources for Agra City and our MacGuffin for this evening. Unfortunately, Kara misuses it slightly, sending it flinging out of inner space into our space. Desperate to fix her mistake before Agra City loses power, Kara gets on board a spaceship and follows the Omegahedron to Earth, where she instantly powers up and becomes Supergirl. While she's on Earth, she takes on the disguise of Linda Lee, an orphan and student of the local boarding school in the lazy town of Midvale, Illinois. There she meets Lucy Lane, sister to intrepid reporter Lois, and Jimmy Olsen. However, the Omegahedron is first discovered by Selena, a witch who, despite machinations of world domination, apparently sucks at magic. However, with the power of the Omegahedron, her powers grow exponentially, and she begins her plans to take over the world. Okay, bear with me, this is where things get a little weird. Selena, for whatever reason, insists that she has a husband for her rule over Earth. She picks Ethan, a groundskeeper at Midvale High, and drugs him with a love potion. You know, the classic fall in love with the first person you see type shit. Unfortunately, she still kind of sucks at being evil, and Ethan escapes, laying eyes on Kara instead. Oops! Being a mature and responsible adult, Selena decides she's gonna pick a fight with a literal teenager over this man. She temporarily wins by sending Kara to the Phantom Zone, which I guess is also accessible by magic? Okay then, why not? But Kara breaks out and defeats Selena, both ending her machinations for global domination and retrieving the Omegahedron. She promptly returns to Agra City, repowering her home and saving her people. The end. This is, I think you'll agree, kind of an insane plot summary. But not to worry, it's actually more insane than all of that, by quite a considerable margin actually, which is part of why this movie is so much fun. It's genuinely on the level of Superman 3 as to what the hell is happening content. However, before we get into talking about the movie in more detail, a cheeky Patreon plug. For a closer inside look at my videos and the process of working on them, look no further than the Michael in Lo-Fi Patreon. Signing up will not only grant you early access to my videos, but extra content as well. This can include clips from videos that are a work in progress, clips I end up editing out of videos, bloopers, and even the notes I take while watching film and TV on this channel. On top of this, you can also gain access to extra reviews that don't get posted to the channel. One such review for Alien Romulus is currently up publicly on my Patreon, but future reviews in that style will be for members only. You will also be able to lodge video requests, so if there's something you would love for me to talk about on this channel, you can lodge your request there. Not only will you be getting all this, but you would also be supporting this channel, for which I would be very grateful. So swing by the Michael and Lo-Fi Patreon. Look around, you might find something you like. Now back to the video. It is worth noting before we continue that there are two cuts of this film, the international theatrical cut, which runs at about 124 minutes, and the director's cut, which runs at 138. For the purposes of this video, I watched the director's cut on the advice of viewers who have seen the movie before and knew which one is better. Furthermore, I always like to take the movie at face value of the creator's initial intent where possible. I to this day have never seen the theatrical cuts of Dawn of Justice or Justice League, and I'm likely never going to. So if I mention something and and you go, hang on, I don't remember that happening, it is most likely because we have seen 2 different cuts of the movie. Where appropriate, I will note if a scene I am discussing is director cut only, so we can discuss how the film would be affected by its removal. Anyway, moving on. The first thing about this movie I want to touch on is that it is actually put together pretty decently. Now, is it on the grand epic scale of the first 2 Superman movies? Not even remotely. But the thing is, I don't think it was trying to be. It's not like Superman 4, which is trying to convince you that it's still the same epic scale universe with shitty blue screen and Milton Keynes. Supergirl deliberately looks like this. Rather than go for a great epic, it's going for something on a smaller scale, an intimate dream rather than a great legend. I think this is a pretty good approach to take for the film. For one thing, Supergirl needed to be distinct from the Superman main series in a big way. While I think Kara as a character should get a story on the same epic scale as the 1978 Superman film, indeed that's what I'm hoping Woman of Tomorrow is, if they tried to do that here at this point in time, it would have looked exactly like what it would have been. Cutting and pasting the Reeve movies, but tacking a different character into the lead. That wouldn't have been fair to Kara, I don't think, so giving her film its own distinct identity was by far the better move here. In this way, it really does succeed massively. Director Geno Zhvak shoots much of the film through diffused lenses, making it feel soft and dreamy. Argo City doesn't look remotely like the harsh crystalline structure of the Kryptonian main city, instead feeling more organic or grown. The people of Argo move lightly or appear to be in an almost trance state. By the way, the set for Argo City is awesome. This more light, dreamy approach is even present in the way Zhvak directs Supergirl's flight scenes. When Kara first lands on Earth, she bounces weightlessly as she gets the hang of her new powers. Every other flight scene in the film follows this airy feeling, rather than try to capture the speed and power of Kryptonian flight. Zhvak is more interested in the feeling of flying one might have in a dream. It makes this film tonally distinct from Reeves' films, and I think this was necessary. The Salkinds had attempted to get Richard Lester back to direct this film, and I honestly think it was a good thing he declined. If he'd ended up shooting the flight scenes exactly the way he did for Superman's 2 and 3, this film might have lost a little bit of its own individual personality. By the way, the Salkinds also phoned Robert Wise to direct this film, who is famous for things like The Day the Earth Stood Still, West Side Story, and the first Star Trek film. That could have been interesting. The other thing going for this movie stylistically is that alongside the airy dream nature of it all is a healthy dose of high camp. Now, Selena and her mob of witches and warlocks are not great villains if we're being honest with ourselves. I'll come back to why later, but I can't really come around to hating them because they are portrayed with such a high level of camp that they just become great fun to watch. It helps that Faye Dunaway is just going for being as silly as possible in the role, making it all the more infectiously fun. Wait, Faye Dunaway? That's another thing about this movie. The cast is kind of insane. Faye Dunaway plays the main villain Selena. Famed English comedian Peter Cook plays her useless warlock ex-boyfriend Nigel, which is even funnier to me when you remember that his comedic partner Dudley Moore was in mind to play Mr. Mixes Pitlick in the original treatment for Superman 3. Peter O'Motherfucking Toole is in this movie. Lawrence of Arabia. He's in this movie as a Kryptonian wizard. How did this happen? I mean, to be fair, Peter O'Toole isn't in this movie much, so he was probably more on the expensive side, but still. And that's to say nothing of some of the names who are on the cast shortlist for this movie. Brooke Shields and Demi Moore auditioned for the role of Kara. The latter was actually initially given the role of Lucy Lane, but she had to turn it down in the end due to obligations to another film. Dolly Parton was allegedly offered the role of Selena. I cannot stress enough how funny that would have been if it had happened. But yeah, overall, in terms of production value, there isn't really anything wrong with the movie. The effects can border on the wonky, sure, but I don't see a problem with that. The kitschy, glowy magic energy is actually really fun to me. The Argo City set is genuinely impressive, and the flight scenes may have aged a little less gracefully than some of the Reeve movie stuff, but they still look pretty good to me. They still work. So far, there isn't anything wrong with the movie. At the center of this film is, of course, Kara herself. How does she fare in this movie in terms of getting a character? Well, that's the thing. Kara herself is actually a pretty good summary of both the good and the bad of this movie, the undeniable charm the film has and the more iffy aspects of it. I'll begin with the good because I do like to start out with a compliment, and that compliment goes to Helen Slater. As I noted earlier, Brooke Shields and Demi Moore were on the shortlist to play the role of Kara, but Zhvak turned them down, believing a less-known actress should take the role instead. Ilya Salkind, in a rare moment of making a good decision, agreed, and the two settled on Slater for the role. This was by a long way the better decision. Slater fully becomes Kara in this film, embodying the role with an infectious joy and excitement. The scene where she discovers her powers on Earth works as well as it does in part because of her performance. She's so excited by her abilities that you can't help but smile too. More than anything else, Slater is playing Kara as if she's truly having fun being Supergirl, which makes her all the more an endearing character. But at the same time, she still has to portray the power of a Kryptonian, something she does perfectly as well. Slater isn't given as much action as Superman is in his movies, but in the moment she gets some, she shines there as well. Slater really does feel like Kara come to life straight off the pages of the comic books. It's a fantastic performance. However, Kara in this film falls into the same trouble as a lot of characters in the Salkind-produced Superman films, one I've pointed out time and again in my series on them. Slater's performance is so good that at first glance you might not notice that the writing she's given doesn't actually give her a lot of character. But if you take her character as is on paper, Kara really isn't a whole lot. I mean, sure, she's a fish out of water on Earth. She's driven and determined. She doesn't suffer fools. The most character she gets in this movie is a moment where she's genuinely offended at Zoltar for giving into self-pity when they're both locked in the Phantom Zone. But beyond this, I don't really feel like I know anything about her. She has a list of character traits, but I don't really feel like they coalesce into an actual character, if that makes sense. And a lot of the character she does have falls into a commonplace and honestly really annoying trope: the naive woman with superpowers. Yeah, that's right, we're getting a little political in this superhero B-movie review. Lock the doors! In general discussion, the trope I'm referring to is the born sexy yesterday trope, the concept of an attractive woman who just doesn't understand the world and needs others, typically men, to teach her about it. The classic examples have been listed ad nauseum by others: Lilu from The Fifth Element, Korra from Tron Legacy, etc. But a common part of this trope is that the stunningly naive woman in question frequently has some great power or talent, like kicking ass, or in today's case, being a powerful Kryptonian who can fly. Now, I hesitate to use the trope term born sexy yesterday for Kara because this movie isn't really interested in exploiting Kara for sex appeal. It more paints her as a naive kid, which comes with its own problems. But my point is that the phrase born sexy yesterday doesn't quite apply here. However, someone on Reddit once referred to this trope as the clueless goddess, so I'm just gonna shamelessly steal that instead because it works. Sorry. And Kara really does fit this trope to a T. She's brand new on Earth, taking it all in with childlike wonder. She asks questions like, what's a train, to Zoltar about Earth? She's clueless in how to interact with other girls her age. In one of the more aggravating examples, the movie implies that she's learned kissing from Ethan, her kind of love interest across the movie. She might be an all-powerful Kryptonian, but she's also just a naive girl who needs someone to show her around. It's pretty infantilizing, and definitely had me rolling my eyes a couple of times. And look, the thing with Kara is that with her origin story, this fish out of water thing is unavoidable. She arrives on Earth as a teenager, unlike her cousin who has grown up his whole life here. So the aspect of her not understanding Earth culture makes total sense, and I think it could actually be written very well. But this sort of patronizing way of approaching this, with her wistfully looking into her mirror, fascinated by what a kiss is, or shit like that, is a disservice to the character and plays into this trope of infantilizing an otherwise extremely powerful character. Now, to be clear, this movie isn't guilty of anything that the original comics weren't at the time. Kara in the Silver and Bronze Age was also written as naive and occasionally as a bit stupid. Even Superman talks down to her a lot, which really sucks to read, actually. It's just a shame that Kara was saddled with this trope here and in the comics for so long, as there is so much more you can do with this character if you sit and really try. I haven't watched the CW Supergirl series, but I've been led to believe that it does apply the fish out of water aspect to Kara in a way that deepens her character instead of patronizing her. I have high hopes that the upcoming Woman of Tomorrow film will do much the same. It can be done, but it wasn't here. And that's a shame. The other thing I find interesting about this movie is that it really isn't a superhero origin story in the same way that Superman was in 1978. See, at the end of the movie, Kara doesn't become a full-fledged Supergirl protector of Earth alongside her cousin. No, instead she fucks off home with the Omegahedron to save Argus City, and it's implied she's going to stay there, living with her family and leaving the heroics to Kal-El. The truly interesting thing to me about movie Kara is that she doesn't really want to be a superhero. She's just here for the Omegahedron. Every piece of action she finds herself in is just sort of by circumstance. Her first battle on Earth is simply because these guys get out of her truck to sexually assault her, a deeply grim part of an otherwise very lighthearted movie. She gets involved with the runaway digger pretty much because it was the decent thing to do. Every other battle she has is either in self-defense or to retrieve the Omegahedron. She has no interest in becoming a savior like Kal-El, which is interesting because to begin with, at least in the comics, Kara aspired to be just like her older cousin and to impress him and to prove to him she could be as good as he is. This Kara has no interest in proving that. It's really interesting, and I do wonder if this has laid the foundations of more modern adaptations of Kara, where she wants to be a hero, but is also frustrated by being under Kal-El's shadow. It's worth thinking about, I reckon. How many times have I pronounced Kal-El in this video? Who am I, Terrence Stamp? One of the more interesting aspects of this movie is its approach to adapting the lore of Kara Zor-El as it existed at the time. Buckle in, fellas, I'm about to get nerdy. Get nerdy? Like the t-shirt wasn't a tip-off? I'll begin with the Earthbound part of her life and how she lives on Earth when she's there. In the comics, when Kara lands, she checks herself into an orphanage under the alias of Linda Lee, wearing a dark wig as her disguise as opposed to her cousin's glasses. She spends a lot of time there trying not to get adopted, as she doesn't want a set of parents to worry about hiding her secret from. This doesn't really work out for her, as during a period of time where she had no superpowers, she ended up getting adopted by the Danvers. So when she got her powers back, she would end up leading a double life with them anyway, until she finally revealed her secret to them in 1962. Fairly obviously, this is a lot to adapt, so the movie streamlines this by having Kara set up shop in a boarding school instead, still under the Linda Lee alias though. By the way, the principal of this school is named Mr. Danvers. That's a nice reference there. I think in concept, this adaptation is not only pretty good, but actually a bit better than the finagling with the orphanages in the comics. It's simpler, but it also does mean the pacing of the film takes a hit. Sure, we get to see Kara involve herself in the classics of 80s high school movie tropes. She gets a best friend, who we'll come back to. She goes up against the resident bully, there's a shower scene for some reason, all that stuff. And a lot of this is fun, but it does come at the expense of pacing. This part of the film slows down a lot to allow for Kara to engage with her Linda Lee alter ego, which is a shame. Also, for some reason, they decide that Kara picked the Linda Lee alias after seeing a portrait of Robert E. Lee in Mr. Danvers' office. Okay, who wrote this? Do we need to have a conversation? However, there is an interesting massive omission in Kara's origin story. Her cousin's involvement. See, Clark and Kara have an interesting dynamic to begin with. When Kara crashes down to Earth in the comics, Kara doesn't actually pop up publicly as a superhero to begin with. Instead, she works as sort of Superman's secret weapon, taking on jobs when he's not around and doing it unseen so people don't know she exists. Why? That I'm not sure about. But that was the deal for some time until eventually Superman decides, for Kara by the way, that she can be her own hero and reveals her to the world in Action Comics 285 in 1962. By the way, by any modern standard, this comic is crazy. There's a whole page where people say the craziest things you've ever read in response to Kara's revelation, and a panel where she swears to President Kennedy to protect the American people. Guess you couldn't protect him from the man on the grassy knoll, huh, Clark and Kara? Skill issue. However, the film doesn't do any of this. Initially, Superman was going to be a big part of the Supergirl film. The initial idea was that Clark show Kara how to use her powers, then promptly get kidnapped by a magician, at which point the drive of the film would have been Kara fighting to save her cousin. However, Christopher Reeve declined to be in the film, which meant that his involvement in her origin story would have to be completely excised. This is, I think, a net plus for the film. As I said, this movie needed to be its own thing, not relying on the Superman series as it existed at the time. Having Chris Reeve in the movie would have threatened to overshadow Kara as a character, especially if the plot of the film was that she saved Superman. This means that Kara's move to heroism is entirely of her own drive to stop Selena and save Argo City, not from any influence from Clark. It's pretty rad. Let's check in on Argo City 2 for a second, because this is the part of the lore that the movie does not do well, because it doesn't really explain it at all. In the comics, the idea is that Argo City is a domed city that, when Krypton exploded, survived through, I guess, sheer will. However, the ground under the city was still irradiated by the explosion, rendering it all kryptonite. Zor-El, Kara's father, led an initiative to leadline the ground of the whole city to protect the people from kryptonite poisoning, but the rock Argo City got bombarded by meteorites anyway, so Zor-El took a page out of his brother's book and shot his daughter, now a teenager, in a rocket at Earth to save her. Now, the movie changes a fair bit of this, which in of itself isn't a bad thing. I like the idea of Argo City existing in a pocket dimension and the fact that Kara only leaves it to save her people. What I don't like is that the movie never explains what Argo City is doing there in the first place. It tells us that Kara is Kal-El's cousin, which implies that she's Kryptonian, but it never bothers to explain what a Kryptonian city is doing in a pocket universe at all. Was it a last-ditch effort to save the Kryptonian people from annihilation? Was it just for the vibes? You don't get to find out. It's really weird. Oh yeah, also apparently Argo City has a resident wizard named Zoltar, which means that magic exists in this universe now. Speaking of which, taking villain duties today is Selena, the girl failure witch who stumbles onto unlimited power because the Omegahedron fell into her soup, that's real, and obviously decides to take over the world. Now, as a villain, Selena really isn't that much at all. In fact, if I were being harsh, I'd say she's actually a pretty crap villain. She has no motivation outside of "the world is mine." and spends more of her screen time chasing a groundskeeper for a boarding school than she actually does being much of a threat. It also really doesn't take much to defeat her in the end. Supergirl flies around her so hard she makes a tornado, which then flings Selena into the Phantom Zone through a mirror. Don't worry, that last bit does make sense. Supergirl just used that mirror to escape the Phantom Zone. But the thing is, I can't really hate Selena because she and the world of magic she's from have such a bizarre personality that she and that world become truly entertaining. For starts, there's the fact that Faye Dunaway clearly knows what kind of movie she's in and is just having a good ass time. This performance is camp of the highest order, and it's really entertaining. I think it's also the only way you can really play a character like this. You can't take Selena the Witch seriously as a character. What would the fun in that be? But the fun doesn't end with how Dunaway plays the role. See, until Selena harnesses the full power of the Omegahedron, she sucks at being evil. She's not a classic villain with a cool air and a devout following of minions who worship her. She's running her plans for world domination out of a disused carnival and doesn't even have much to speak of by way of a coven. The only person with any faith in her is her roommate Bianca, and even that's touch and go. She fails at keeping prisoners, she trips and falls into most of her spells she uses. Basically, she sucks at being a witch. This is way more fun to me. We've all seen the Machiavellian evil genius before, so seeing someone become the most powerful person on the planet completely by accident when she really has no talent whatsoever is different. It's even more fun because Selena seems completely unaware of just how bad she is at being evil. Everyone around her knows, but she doesn't. It's just heaps of fun, as is the fact that when given the power to take over the world, her sense of decor is seen as tacky by the other witches. When she finally masters the Omegahedron, she manifests herself a whole mountain with a castle on top, which is hilariously placed in the middle of Illinois. But despite this awesome show of power, none of her peers are impressed. Bianca is nonplussed by her interior decorating skills, Nigel is derisive.
The old dangling in a cage routine.
Despite all her power, she still never impresses anyone because she's tacky and bad at magic. The other funny thing is in the world of magic as the movie sets it up. Witches and warlocks exist, but they have to take day jobs as well. Peter Cook's character Nigel is established as one of the most powerful warlocks in the nation, but he's still stuck teaching computer science at Midvale High. By the way, this part of the world building is even funnier when you remember that Selena is very unemployed. There's also a throwaway joke about how it's standard practice for witches to pay membership fees to join covens, which is ridiculous when you think about it for longer than 2 seconds, but hilarious in the moment. The world of magic and witches had been brought into the 20th century with a delightful cynicism. Even users of magic are stuck working the grind and paying bills. I kind of wish the movie had leaned a bit more into that, but as it is, these little jokes provide a fun background to Selena's plight as a villain, and possibly even a motivation if you squint. Perhaps she wants to take over the world because she's sick of having to pay her phone bill. I mean, we can all relate to that, right? Unfortunately, all this fun world building is a bit buried by what drives the main conflict between Selena and Supergirl. See, for much of the movie, the battle isn't over Supergirl foiling Selena's plans for world domination, or the fact that Selena has the Omegahedron that Supergirl needs to take back to Argo City. It's over Ethan the groundskeeper. As I noted in my plot summary, Selena puts a love potion on Ethan to make him fall in love with her, only to screw up and let Ethan out, where he falls in love with Linda Lee instead. Does Selena take the L? No! Instead, she decides she's going to kill Linda. That's right, the battle between our hero and villain kicks off because a grown-ass woman decides to pick a fight with a teenager over a bloke. Oh dear. Now, to be fair, there is an element of comedy to how this plays out. At no point does Selena seem to realize that Linda Lee and Supergirl are one and the same. So her beef with Supergirl goes something along the lines of, "Grr, that Supergirl keeps interfering with my plans to spike this hot guy's drink and kill this teenager. I'll deal with her. Then kill this teenager who stole my man." And it's not like they're fighting over 1980s Tom Cruise or anything. This is the guy who does a bunch of coke and sells out John McClane and Die Hard. You can both do better than that. Selena has more chemistry with Bianca anyway. If this movie had any guts, they would have been girlfriends. Actually, let's talk about Bianca real quick. I adore Bianca. She has my whole heart. She can do no wrong. I am honestly tempted to leave it at that, but I need you all to appreciate this character as I do. The thing about Bianca is that she is keenly aware of just how ridiculous the world she lives in is. She knows that the magic in this world is nonsense and is very aware that Selena is the worst witch in town, but she doesn't really care. In fact, she seems amused by it. She's just along for the ride, occasionally passing commentary on Selena's failings with a tongue-in-cheek humor. She's impressed when Selena pulls off a spell, yes, but she also doesn't miss an opportunity to comment comment when she's being ridiculous. In a way, she's a stand-in for the audience, watching with amusement as everything unfolds. She's just a lot of fun. See, it's not easy to make a character like Bianca work. In fact, I hate how these sorts of characters are written today. That self-awareness about the universe they live in is much more frequently written as detached sarcasm these days, which isn't nearly as fun. It's the fact that Bianca is having the time of her life following these losers around that makes her so lovable. Even while lampshading the ridiculous aspects of the movie, she's still an earnest, fun character. The only thing wrong with her character is that when Supergirl defeats Selena at the end by sending her to the Phantom Zone, Bianca gets sucked in with her. Bianca didn't deserve that. She should have gotten the classic "nah, I'm out of here" moment and run away and started hanging out with the Mid-Vale High group as their kooky aunt or something. She didn't actually do much villaining over the movie anyway, so it's not like she deserved to get shadow-realmed. Free my girl Bianca. She did nothing wrong.
Jimmy Olsen.
As Christopher Reeve was not interested in coming back for a part in this movie, the writers had to look elsewhere for connections to the main Superman universe. To solve this problem, Jimmy Olsen, as played by Mark McClure, makes an appearance, and a new character is introduced. Lucy Lane, younger sister of Lois's. So now's as good a time as any to take issue with the Donnaverse Jimmy Olsen. He isn't really much of a character. Now, on the one hand, I understand. These movies are not about him, but the Daily Planet is otherwise pretty well fleshed out as a place that feels real and lived in. Lois gets the most development, but Perry White still feels like a character. But there isn't nearly the same presence of character with Jimmy. Really, most of all he does is, oh golly gee, Superman sure is neat stuff, and run around with a camera. I'm not going to pretend that Jimmy was the deepest character in the comics at the time, but he did have that Superman's pal thing going on. He was a silly little guy who'd end up in situations and pal around with the Man of Steel. But in the movies, he's not much of that at all. He's just sort of there. I genuinely can't tell you if Mark McClure is a good Jimmy Olsen, because for the most part, he's really just standing on the sidelines wearing that bow tie. He's also portrayed as a bit naive in the movies, which isn't totally accurate. Like, Jimmy is the young cub photographer in the comics, sure, but he's not an infant. He's got experience. All this ranting is to say he's not much better off in this movie. Really, Jimmy's role is to walk on screen, prove that this is the same universe as the Donna movies, and do his golly gee routine. It's a bit of a bummer, but again, the movie isn't really about him, so I'm not sure how much complaining I can really do. I don't know, this just gets me because Jimmy also gets screwed in pretty much every adaptation of Superman I've ever seen. At least he's not a Fed like he was in the Snyderverse. Fuck you, Zach. Okay, well, how's Lucy Lane doing? A bit better? See, in the comics, Lucy Lane is an air hostess or air traffic controller, depending on when it is. She's a background character, really, but one that exists in the comic. However, what seems to have happened in this movie is they've taken the name Lucy Lane and stuck it on a brand new character, because in this movie, Lucy is a student at Mid-Vale High, so Kara can have her very own Lane to talk to. Sure, okay. The thing is, though, I do like this Lucy Lane. Sure, the costume designers gave her a cap that she wears sideways, so you know she's a rebel, but that's just cute 80s movie bullshit. I don't care. What really makes Lucy work is that she is just as daring as her older sister. In a scene where Selena possesses a digger to kidnap Ethan and make him fall in love with her, Lucy jumps into the digger to try to take control of it without thinking about it. Later on in the movie, when Selena manages to at least take over Midvale, Lucy's the one leading a protest to tell Selena to get stuffed, shouting at a witch who could wipe her out and calling her evil because she refuses to be bullied into silence. Through and through, Lucy is a Lane. I love all of this. It would have been even cooler to see Demi Moore in the role, but Maureen Teefy still manages to capture the Margot Kidder snark, so I'm happy with her casting as well. Had they managed to continue this series past the first movie, Kara and Lucy would have been an endlessly entertaining duo to watch. However, there is one thing that is imported faithfully from the comics, and that is Lucy Lane's relationships. In the comics, she has an on and off again thing going with Jimmy, even getting married at some point. And just as in the comics, Jimmy and Lucy do fall in love in this movie. Hang on a second. Oh my god! Okay, I've been dancing around this for most of the video, but it's time we talk about it. This movie has some really dodgy ideas about adults hanging out with high schoolers. Jimmy is meant to be in his early 20s, right? He's pretty young. There is a joke in Superman 3 about how at least high school friends are still in high school. So, young fella. He also alleges that he and Lucy have known each other their whole lives. But this is still an adult saying to a 16 to 17-year-old, I'm in love with you, and the two of them sharing a kiss, and this is passed off as completely okay. No, this is weird. And the thing is, this is a director's cut only problem. In the theatrical cut, the scenes where Jimmy and Lucy profess their love for each other are wisely left on the cutting room floor. So, you know, if you go for the theatrical cut, you do miss out on this strangeness, which is probably better off that way. So hey, if we watch the theatrical cut, we're totally in the clear, right? No Chris Hansen moments at all, right? Nope, because we still have Linda and Ethan to contend with. A grown-ass man in his 30s, now in love with a high schooler. Ew. Now, the thing that gets me about this is it really isn't Ethan's fault. Like, he was drugged with a love potion, Linda was the first person he saw, so by the mechanics of the film, he didn't mean to fall in love with a 16-year-old. But it's still weird the movie's going there, right? It's bizarre that Kara's main love interest is like twice her age. It also does play into that clueless goddess thing I mentioned earlier, the man teaching the young, naive, incompetent superwoman about the ways of earth and love. This is kinda stinky, guys. Hell, even Nigel the Warlock gets a girlfriend like half his age at the end of the movie, though they are both consenting adults in that case, so that's above board at least. Also, to my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans, that's Trillian from the 1981 miniseries. Neat. I don't know, this is just very strange to me that the two key relationships in this movie are very, very inappropriate. I mean, hell, the Selena and Ethan relationship would still be its own brand of dodgy due to the complete lack of consent in love potion situations. This movie just has a very cooked sense of romance that is aged like milk and was probably even inappropriate then. If this seems a funny note to leave this video on, don't worry, it's because it is. The thing is, it's not too easy to do a really in-depth analysis of Supergirl because it isn't really trying to be anything that deep. The chief goal of this movie is to be a light, fun superhero romp that brings Kara to life and gives her a fun villain to face off against. In this respect, it's a successful film to me. I really enjoyed it, and I genuinely think other people should see it. So my question is, why is it rated so badly? Why is it seen as a bad movie? Don't get me wrong, it is flawed. There are pacing issues at play and some very dodgy choices in the screenplay. These have been pointed out by others, but other epithets are pretty frequently tacked onto this film. Boring is one, nonsensical is another. The first one is majorly subjective, so I won't touch that, but nonsensical? That seems harsh. There is an internal logic to this film, it's just sometimes a bit silly. Supergirl was never going to rise to the epic heights of the 1978 Superman movie, but I think a lot of people, consciously or otherwise, compare this film to that one when evaluating it and find it bad in comparison. But these are two completely different movies. One is a grand scale epic, the other a short, silly adventure. If you're evaluating the two by the same criteria, you're not doing either film any service. So if you haven't seen Supergirl, I say this. Put the refilms out of your mind. They might exist in the same universe, but tonally they have nothing to do with this film. Approach this film on its own terms. I think you'll find something to love, or at least appreciate.